Let's speak with Benjamin Anthony, CEO of Miriam Institute, who served with the IDF inside the Gaza Strip and now an Israeli security analyst. Good afternoon to you, Benjamin. Lovely to have you with us, sir. You know this territory well. You know the politics of it. You know the actuality on the ground. Your reaction, firstly, of Mr. Netanyahu's announcement yesterday?
Well, I think that Prime Minister Netanyahu is correct in the idea that he's going to continue to ratchet up military pressure against this terror organization Hamas that has been holding Israel's hostages since the horrendous massacre of October 7th, 2023. 20 of those hostages are being held in the dungeons of Gaza. They are alive. They are deeply unwell, they're being tortured, and they are drastically underweight and emaciated. And a further 30 are no longer alive. All of them need to come home. All of them need to be released by Hamas and return to their family and to their country. So it's very appropriate that the Prime Minister should be trying to drive Hamas back to the negotiating table, not by acceding to the demands of this terror organization, but rather by having any negotiations take place under fire, under the fire and the white heat that the IDF will bring to the area in the Gaza Strip where we will operate, which will largely be centered around Gaza City. About 1 million Gazans live there. They will be moved out of that area. And this is going to be a gradual ratcheting up of the operation. It's not going to begin tomorrow. What will happen is the IDF will inform the residents of Gaza City that they are to vacate. We will then start to build and erect and establish the tools of absorption. So those include medical facilities, hospitals, tent cities, and so forth. And in tandem with that, the US administration is going to be increasing the distribution sites that are underway and working and operating inside Gaza from the current number of 4 distribution sites to 16. And that's to rob Hamas of its source of leadership and terror in the Strip, namely to rob them of their control over the food inside Gaza. So it's a positive development. One thing I will say, any intention, any operation that moves towards the very clear vision that President Trump put forward and Prime Minister Netanyahu adopted, namely allowing and facilitating and incentivizing the Gazans to vacate the Gaza Strip and to locate themselves elsewhere, is a policy in which I am in favor of. Any policy that sees the IDF take long-term control over the Gazans, I think would be an error, it would be a mistake, and it's for that reason that I'm pleased that Prime Minister Netanyahu has said again and again, we have no intention to govern the Palestinian Arabs inside the Gaza Strip.
He was very clear on that point, of course. Detractors of this will say, well, hang on a second, there's 1 million people. You gave the number there yourself. Where the heck do they go? There's not space. The place is flattened mostly. How do you keep those innocent people who have nothing to do with Hamas? And we're all aware that, you know, in a war, terrible things happen. We all understand that. But here's a chance to try and avoid it. And critics of Israel will say it's going to be the same again. There's going to be more carnage, more human suffering, more death. And these people cannot just vacate because there's no place they can go to. What's the response to that, Benjamin?
Well, the whole premise is completely false. Of course, Israel has falsely been accused of ethnic cleansing the Gaza Strip of Gazans. Well, simultaneously, we're told that too many Gazans are being held in one particular geographical area within the Strip. The reality of the matter is that since our counteroffensive inside the Gaza Strip began, in the wake of the attack of October the 7th, we have been successfully moving and maneuvering the preponderance of the Gazan population away from the areas of hot, kinetic conflict to safe zones. That is the reality. That's what we've done from the moment we entered the Gaza Strip to this very point, and we are more than capable of moving 1 million people approximately from Gaza City to similar areas where they can live, where they can gather their food, where they can gain sustenance, and where they will be away from the kinetic fire of this war. We will be able to do that, but I want your viewers to understand something. There is a total double standard that is applied to the state and the people of Israel in the context of this conflict. Everybody knows that in any other theater of war, there is a 1-2 combination that is thrown by the international community in the face of a displaced population. The 1-2 is as follows. First, the international community implores neighboring and non-neighboring states to absorb the displaced. And then when that happens, the same international community applauds those neighboring and non-neighboring states for doing so. So, for example, in the Syrian civil war, nearly 6 million Syrians have been absorbed by neighboring Turkey and Germany between them. In the context of Ukraine, more than 5 million Ukrainians were absorbed by Poland and, surprise, surprise, by the State of Israel since that war began against Russia. Only in the context of this war against this terrorist organization does the international community go back on all its conventions and apply a completely false standard to Israel. It says that any country that absorbs the Gazans is complicit in ethnic cleansing, and that uniquely only the Gazans want to stay in the conditions in which they are so immiserated as a consequence of the actions of their own leadership. And I just want to make one final point. I served in this war, as did so many others, so many other members of the IDF who did a great deal more than I did. Everybody of age has given to this effort. I know the level of distraction inside the Gaza Strip because I spent a significant amount of time there. It is beyond my abilities to describe, but it is justified and justifiable and appropriate. I'm not a particular fan of the Gazans. I don't agree with the idea that the Gazans didn't support the atrocities wrought against us by Hamas. I watched them cheer as our innocents were strewn with their entrails hanging out through the streets of Gaza on October the 7th. So I don't give them too much credit, and I don't have too much love for them. But if some of your viewers are fans of the Gazans, and if they are supporters of the Palestinian Arabs in the Gaza Strip, they should not want them staying inside the Gaza Strip either, because I can tell you from personal testimony, it is uninhabitable. Egypt should take in the Gazans. It is eminently well-resourced to do so.
And it's
I
next door.
To see that happen, yes.
Indeed. Just on that point then, so the way this would unfold is not a case of we will destroy these areas and then move in. This would happen almost by installments. So the Israelis would be in there, setting up, as you described at the beginning, these sort of bases, these aid areas and medical facilities. They'd be doing this alongside the fact that Hamas are, supposedly running the show. It would happen in parallel.
It would happen sequentially, and it's actually already underway. So there's been a commitment of additional funds by the United States to the amount of at least $1 billion in order, as I said, to expand the number of distribution sites for aid from 4 to 16. That's already committed. The work is already being undertaken on the ground. We would then warn the Gazans, move the Gazans out, erect those positions for the absorption of the Gazans, and only then start the kinetic work that we need in order to rid these areas of Hamas terrorists who are still held up there inside Gaza City.
Some sources are saying, we're just hearing this, that Israel are reportedly giving civilians sheltering in Gaza until October the 7th, the 2-year anniversary of the Hamas attacks on Gaza that inaugurated this war to leave. Does that sound about right to you? Is that anything correlated by what you're hearing, Benjamin?
It's absolutely right. The cabinet, the security cabinet, convened yesterday evening, and they decided that the complete takeover of Gaza City would be done by October 7th, 2025. The symbolism of that is obvious, but in addition to that, they put forward the terms for an end to this war, and those terms included the return of all of our hostages, every single one of them, no step-by-step time releases of our hostages any longer, the demilitarization of the Gaza Strip in its entirety, the disarming of Hamas. All of those terms are required for an end to this war. So really, if Hamas does care, which we know it doesn't, for the Gazan civilians, it has a way of stepping out of this dreadful scenario that it brought upon itself. Lay down its arms, return our hostages, and this war can end.
And Benjamin, every time we talk about this, at least one person gets in touch and says, hang on a second, there was a peace deal. Hamas were willing to release the hostages. Israel scuppered that. Is that true? If it isn't, what did happen to stop what everybody thought momentarily was a pivotal point that was going to end this?
Well, what happened was that Hamas wanted to have a time release of the hostages based on humanitarian grounds and the physical condition of some hostages. The idea being that the return of some of the hostages was more urgent than the return of others. Now, Israel rightly made the decision that a time release of hostages, first of all, by definition, is completely macabre and inhumane. But in addition to that, all of the hostages are now humanitarian causes and must come home because they're in danger of not being able to survive for much longer. And I just want people, you know, they say a picture paints 1,000 words. This is Eviatal David before he was kidnapped on October the 7th. I want your viewers to see it. A young man full of life, vim and vigor and happiness. This is Eviatal David today. This is a still shot taken from the Hamas video that they released. He looks like a human living anatomy chart. You can see his clavicle, the bones on his shoulders. He is terribly gaunt and emaciated. So Israel cannot agree to delaying the release of the hostages in accordance with Hamas's completely depraved timeline. They all need to come home, and it's very, very positive that we continue to take the fight to this terror organization. It's right that we do so, and I believe that it may bring Hamas back to the negotiating table.
Well, let's hope it does. And just a word, finally, Benjamin. Germany has suspended the sale of weapons to Israel that could be used in Gaza. This is according to Chancellor Merz. He said that it's increasingly difficult to understand how Israel's operation in the Strip, which now includes seizing Gaza City, would help achieve its aims. He says under these circumstances, the German government will not authorise any exports of military equipment that could be used in Gaza Strip until further notice. Your reaction to that?
Well, my reaction to that is, again, it's a perfect example of non-leadership among the so-called leaders of European countries. It's very lamentable, but he's taking his cue, dare I say it, from Keir Starmer, a completely ineffective leader of Great Britain, who went forward and said, in an incredible exercise of inverted logic and frankly stupidity and weakness, who said that he in September intends to recognize a state for the Palestinian Arabs, a state that never has nor does exist, unless Israel comes to heel and accedes to the demands that Starmer laid out. What all of these leaders ought to be doing, as I've said before, is making a very clear statement, namely, unless Hamas lays down its arms and releases the hostages back home to Israel in September at the UN General Assembly, they will announce the complete dismissal, ending, and termination of any notion of Palestinian statehood as part of their foreign policy in perpetuity. And I would just say, let these leaders sort out the mess in their own backyards before they start dictating what the state of Israel ought to do. I see the mess and the inabilities of Starmer to seal the borders in Great Britain. I see the deterioration in the country in which I grew up. I grew up in the northern city of Leeds in Great Britain. Once that man has showed that he has some capability to govern his own backyard, perhaps he might find the audacity to start dictating to Israel how we ought to govern and protect our own borders. Until that time, I would prefer that these leaders keep quiet and understand that we're fighting the right fight, the righteous fight, to bring home our hostages and end the threat from Hamas.
Listen, Benjamin, it's a great response. Certainly the point about Starmer, there'll be no disagreement around here. Thank you for that, sir. Benjamin Anthony, good to have you with us. He's former IDF and now CEO of the Mir Yam Institute. He served there, he's been out there, he's now an Israeli security analyst.